Go back and look at most of the colleges and universities in India. Maybe 10-20% of the students get campus placement. About 80% they don't get. So we wanted to build some solution to solve this problem.
What is design thinking?
Design thinking is a human-centric iterative approach for problem solving. It is not easy for any individual and enterprise to understand the problem. Most of the time we believe that we know everything about the problem space, but that's not true. Trying out, testing and validating the hypothesis, testing the hypothesis is something very, very important, and that's an integral part of design thinking approach.
Hey everyone, welcome to Lean Wisdom Podcast. Today we have Satya with us. Welcome Satya. Satya brings with him like more than 2 decades of rich experience working across different sized organizations. So today we'll dive in deeper into this topic of design thinking and pick Satya's brains on that.
Certainly.
Yeah. So maybe a quick round of introduction, Satya.
So you already introduced.
So from your side, yeah.
Roughly about 2 decades of experience working with large enterprises, mid-size and startup companies, helping them in digital, scaled agile transformation. So I do quite a few trainings as well in the space of scaled agile, design thinking, product management and so on.
Perfect, great. I think so that brings us to the topic design thinking. I keep hearing this word, somewhat of a buzzword, jargon, a lot of post-its, lot of paper prototypes is what I can imagine when someone says design thinking. Can you decipher that in simple terms for our audience? What is design thinking?
Yeah. So in simple term, design thinking is a human-centric iterative approach for problem solving. So if I want to explain in a very simple example, assume that you are building a product. You're a startup company, you're building a product. Now your product has a value proposition to solve a specific problem. Right? So how do you know that the problem exists first of all? So it's important for us to go and understand the problem. So when you understand the problem, there are varieties of problem which you may get to know. So out of that, which one you want to solve? So for that, understanding the problem space, typically empathizing with the customer, right? Potential customer or the existing customers. Then doing research. Then from there, define the problem statement after empathizing. Then you come up with multiple ideas how you want to solve it. Eventually you develop prototypes and you test the prototypes. So it's a simple 5-step approach, very powerful. It all depends on how we do, how much we do, depending on what kind of problem you want to address.
Yeah, great, thanks. I think that simplifies it a lot. But is it like, I hear this term mostly used in the startup space. Is it only relevant for someone who is trying to build a small business on his own, or starting something on their own, or relevant for larger organizations as well?
Not necessarily, because most of the startup companies, they start using design thinking. You keep hearing from that ecosystem, but design thinking is predominantly used in every organization, be it a very large enterprises, smaller enterprises, or even a startup ecosystem. See, the whole idea is any products or solutions or services, if an enterprise is building, is to solve a problem, right? So by looking at, be it a large enterprise, small enterprise, so adopting this human-centric iterative thinking to solve the problem is pretty much relevant irrespective of the type of the organization or size of the organization.
Good. So is it like, so you said 5-step process, right? So starting with empathy.
Correct.
So what is empathy? Like, how do we actually, because sometimes I feel like this is one term which is not well understood.
Yeah. So the moment we say empathy, empathize the persona.
Yeah.
See, for example, you want to solve a problem of a particular persona. So empathizing that persona is something important. What do we mean by empathize? So take an example, a senior citizen want to travel from point A to point B. Right? So there are plenty of apps available where they can book the ride from point A to point B. But actually when you go deeper and try to understand, there are many people who are 70-year-old, 80-year-old, they may not be very comfortable using these smartphones, these mobile application and stuff like that. Right? So generally what do? They depend on their children's or grandchildren's, seek their help to book a ride. So now, do you see a problem there?
Yeah.
So now is it happening with only one type of user, one set of user, or by and large it's happening with all senior citizens? We don't know. So now we need to really go and talk to them, understand what they go through. So when you empathize, you need to understand two things. One is, what are the tactical needs? The tactical need is, he or she want to travel from point A to point B. That's a tactical need. But underneath there are emotional needs also.
Yeah, largely neglected, unfortunately.
Largely neglected, right? So, and it is not easy to understand an emotional aspect of that user, right?
Yeah.
So unless if you really get into the detail, do some empathy interview, understand them, so the empathy aspect will come into picture, right? So the emotional aspect will come into picture. For example, if he or she wants to book, they're getting frustrated because they're always getting, they're struggling to book and they're depending on somebody else, right? So every time they make a call or request somebody to book, see some of this emotional aspect. This is one example. There may be many. When you actually simulate it, the journey, you try to understand there are many emotional aspects apart from the tactical aspect. So empathy is all about getting into the details of understanding both tactical and emotional needs, and with the solution what we are building for the problems what we identify to solve, I think we need to look at both the aspect to solve it.
I think this is where I also keep hearing this term pretotyping and prototyping. Can you enlighten the audience on what's the difference, when to use what, when to stop at one stage?
Yes. So in this 5-step approach in the design thinking, all the way from empathy, defining the problem statement, sometimes we also call it as point of view for the problem statement. Then we ideate, right? So we come up with multiple ideas. To solve one problem, there may be hundreds of ways in which we can solve the problem. So when you come up with multiple ideas, but also you need to develop some prototypes to see which idea is going to work, or which is that idea you want to use to solve the problem. Oh yeah, you're developing the prototype. So pretotype is more in terms of, should we really build the product or not?
And so what's the primary difference between traditional thinking and design thinking? Because I see whatever you say makes perfect sense, right? But then still, like, product development or solution development in a traditional way tends to take a different approach, right? So what's your experience been?
See, traditional approach is more linear. This is more iterative in nature.
Yeah.
See, it is not easy for any individual and enterprise to understand the problem. Most of the time we believe that we know everything about the problem space. We know everything about the persona and the pain what they go through. But that's not true.
Yeah.
Right? So only when you go do some Gemba walk, when you spend time, do some ethnography, you try to understand what exactly the pain areas. Correct? So now this approach, design thinking approach, sometimes it need a good amount of time. The product management team has to invest good amount of time, because this you cannot do it sitting in a boardroom. You need to go to the place where the problem exists. You need to go to the place where the user exists.
So getting out of the building is vital for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you need to go spend time. Then there are a lot of learning. Then probably you need to translate that into your empathy maps. Then eventually to your roadmap, feature and stories and so on. So it's a time consuming thing at many times. So because of that, organizations and some product management folks may think that they know everything about the customer view. This is exactly what they're facing. They go with the linear approach.
Yeah.
So trying out, testing and validating the hypothesis, testing the hypothesis is something very, very important. and that's an integral part of design thinking approach.
Yeah, I think it eliminates a lot of bias, specifically to like assumptions that we have about our customer ecosystem.
Certainly. In fact, I was involved in one of the design thinking project a couple of years ago. This project was more in terms of see, if you go back and look at most of the colleges and universities in India, maybe 10-20% of the students get campus placement.
Yeah.
By and large, about 80% they don't get. So for them, finding the first job is always difficult.
Yeah.
Right? So we wanted to build some solution to solve this problem. So part of that, we identified the fresh graduates who are engineering holders, MBAs, or even common 3 years degree programs. So we identified a lot of people. So my assumption was the students who live or studied in large metros like Bangalore or Mumbai or Delhi, Gurgaon. So my assumption was, they have better exposure to the tools, to the environment, and for them finding the job is much easier compared to the tier 2, tier 3 cities. But when we identified a lot of such students from tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, when we started interviewing them, understanding what they're going through, what kind of help they need and stuff like that, actually my bias is totally killed out of that activity. It is not true that, at least out of that activity, we learned that it is not true that the kids who are grown up or studied in metros are not having more exposure compared to tier 2, tier 3. That may be the true maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because of proximities and less coverage of internet and stuff like that. But today, tier 2, tier 3 kids are much smarter than, or probably as par with the metro cities.
Yeah.
So some of those biases are going to be there when you start.
Correct.
But when you actually get into the ground, some of those biases will go off.
Yeah, I think great insight. Thanks for sharing that experience. Can you also like share some of the common pitfalls that you have seen in the field? Like one of them is confirmation bias, right? So we go in with some hypothesis, we sort of try to modify our experiments in a way that will actually give us favorable results, right? So have you seen something like that or any other?
It's quite common that we always have biases, especially the confirmation biases. If I strongly incline towards that this is exactly the problem, so I try to create data and try to justify that, okay, this is the problem I want to solve it. So this approach, one is, of course, it's a collaborative approach. So when you challenge each other, there are a lot of new learning take place. And this is basically based on data. You collect the data and you try to analyze the data and you take actions out of it.
Yeah.
So always look at the data, test your hypothesis. The whole idea is to solve the problem, not necessarily that your way or my way, right? The best way has to work out. So data should speak. Whatever the data you collect out of market research or user research.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction, right? So customer research and user research. So probably two different personas, especially from a business perspective.
Yeah, maybe you meant the market research.
Market research.
See, the market research help you to come up with a product strategy. When you are coming up with a product, it is not just the value proposition and solving the problem, right? You might have to look at the value proposition, you might have to look at your revenue models, you might have to look at your cost. There are many aspects you might have to look at. Partners and cost associated, where you want to position your product, what market price you want to position it, where you want to launch your product, the geography. There are many aspects. So the market research helps you, especially when you getting into a market, you come up with the segmentation. When you do research in that particular segmentation, will help you to come up with the strategy for your product. Whereas your user research will get to understand the tactical and emotional needs, pains of that potential user. So both helps in its own way.
Yeah, great. So I see design thinking also being included in frameworks like SAFe, right? SAFe being a framework for business agility, enabling business agility, right? So I think in terms of connecting the dots, what could be helpful for our audience is like, how does it actually make economic sense, right? So going back to like one of the core principles of SAFe, how does design thinking actually enable that kind of like something that provides business value? Because it sort of tapers at test. How is that connected?
Yeah. See, if you look at it, the continuous delivery pipeline in SAFe,
Yeah.
all the way from continuous exploration to release on demand. Part of continuous exploration, the design thinking is integrated. So, be it be for an existing product or be it for a new product, when we are building in a large enterprises, it is important to um, understand what new capabilities or functionalities we want to build in an existing product, or even a new product, what problem you want to solve. So even in the case of existing product, it is extremely important to go with a design thinking approach, which will help you to, one is to validate your hypothesis at the very initial stage, less expensive, rather than you're building partly or fully the solution, then going to the market and market rejects it.
Yeah.
So one is you spend significant amount of money and effort. So to save that, it's a simple approach which will help you to build the right solution, so that ultimately what you're building is going to be viable economically. So that's something very important to consider.
Yeah, perfect. So thanks a lot for your insights on design thinking. If you want to learn more, follow Satya. He shares a lot of insightful posts, especially on LinkedIn. I've been following him. And join our future podcast for this. Thank you.
Thank you.